it's easy to forget that in these challenging and uncertain times, that companies continue to grow. And that means finding and retaining the right people. Let's call them talent, because people make profits. Across the world, it's said that there's such a flux in such talent, with many worried about their future, thinking of moving on or having to move on. This is a time when an individual or a company could make a costly mistake. That's where the right recruitment organization can show its true capability. And so here at the Meet the Leader show, I'm delighted to have the opportunity of interviewing the leader of a global recruitment company who I think has got some very special messages. Let's meet the CEO of X4Group, Pete Rabey. Hello, Peter. Welcome.
Good morning, Malcolm. Good to be with you today.
So tell me about X4Group, and importantly, why X4?
Yeah, it was a much debated decision, as I'm sure you could imagine. We started in 2008 at the last time the world was in pretty dire economic peril. So that was a very interesting time to start a business. But we were incredibly conscious in an industry that has over 40,000 companies in the United Kingdom that work as recruitment businesses. We were really conscious that we wanted to have a name that had the chance, at least, to be recognised, had at least a chance to be a bit standout. And there are so many companies with, two founders' first names, a double, as their names and this type of thing. And we were kind of a bit conscious that we knew we were going to be across 4 sectors, at least initially. There's obviously been some changes and some progression and some developments in relation to that in recent times, but we were going to be across 4 industries. And we actually worked for a business called S3 before we started X4Group. There was a nice progression going to 4, but as well as the fact, of course, is the fact that we were going to be across 4 sectors. I think X4, and like all these things, we wanted to look at Companies House, see what was registered, see what was. There were a couple of things that we wanted to go with that were actually already taken up. So X4 was something that we ended up landing on, and I'm sure it could be better, but I think it stuck with us. And I think companies know us by X4, which is, I guess, its original point. So that's good.
Okay. Well, I've been doing a bit of research on you, and I think you've got some really interesting assets we're going to find about. So perhaps you're times 4 of other people. But there's always a spark, isn't there, that causes a business to explode. Now, what was the spark that caused you and your colleagues to found X4 and for it to take off like it has done?
Yeah, we worked for an incredibly successful business before we started X4, and they'd gone through a big change about 9 to 12 months before we moved on. They floated and became a publicly listed company, and I think anyone that's gone through that journey will recognise that an organisation's culture inevitably will change when you're all of a sudden a public offering. You've got the fact that you've got to report on every single line of your P&L and your balance sheet on a regular basis, and I think in terms of culturally, there'd been some changes that had happened in that organisation, which meant that felt that it was the right time to move on. And thankfully, we'd been high achievers in that business as well that gave us the confidence to be able to do so. So in terms of X4 starting, it felt like a very natural progression at the time.
Excellent, right. A recent survey of 16,000 workers in the UK found that 43% of leaders were failing in their communication to their especially at the moment. You employ around 150 people and you're in the people business. So how do you avoid a lack of communication?
It's probably, in the last 3 months, the most important area that any business has had to get right. We've definitely learned a lot in the last 3 months, and I think we were maybe guilty of overloading the amount of communication that we were doing in the early days to make sure people didn't feel isolated. We have company-wide meetings via Zoom. We have over 100 people that turn up to that on a Friday, where we do a nice wrap-up of all things personal, if there's been any babies born and birthdays and work anniversaries, that kind of thing, and all the way to recognising the great work that's been done in the previous week. There's a company quiz that happens after the thing, after that meeting every week. We have team leader and management and senior meetings on a Wednesday, and I don't think there's a day that goes by where one of our staff isn't got on a video by one member of the team or the other. I think one of the biggest things that we've been really conscious of as a leadership team, to make sure that people have a variety of people that they can reach out to and they can engage with, rather than it just being their line manager day in, day out. Because we've got a performance manager, we've got HR, we've got our own directors of the individual brands, we've got us as leaders that are very, very hands-on and have been very hands-on during the last 3 months. especially, I think we're pretty hands-on anyway, but especially in the last 3 months, we've been making sure of that. We have marketing engaged with people on a one-on-one basis. So people have got many, many different areas of and human contact that they're getting, even if they have been home-based, which of course virtually everyone has been for the last 3 months. So yeah, there've been some great learns along the way, that's for sure.
Brilliant. That's times one of the times four, by the way. You know, okay. As I said in my opening piece, it's an uncertain time for people, as it is for companies. So what advice would you give to a young, aspiring executive who's worried? Hang on in, consider your options, invest in new skills, job seek?
Absolutely. I mean, first things first, we're going on a very large hiring spree ourselves of graduates and non-graduates this summer. It was vital that we had a battle plan in place to get through the really kind of tough, couple of months that it was, but we've managed to get by during that period, which is great. But we've quickly gone on the front foot and want to talk about the future and how great that it is going to be for so many people. And the reality is, having started my working life after the dot-com boom in after 2001 and after 9/11, we knew what tough working conditions were like then. We certainly knew what it was like in 2008, 2009. And the reality is, good people are still going to achieve great things during these times. And I think I couldn't be more proud or more encouraged by some of the standout performances that our leaders and our recruitment specialists have done in the last period. And actually, some of them have been excelling their performance and exceeding, their performance compared to before lockdown. So I think when some people, the going gets tough, rather than feel sorry for themselves, they get on the front foot and say, what can I do to make things better? And I've been so delighted by how many great things we've seen across our business in the last 3 months.
Good. That's brilliant. And I think a lot of that's down to good leadership as well. You say your business purpose is to empower people to succeed. So how do you do that?
I think the biggest thing, I make sure that I final interview everyone that comes into our organisation. And one of the reasons that I do that is because I want to explain that right at the beginning. The interview that I have with people, we don't take on anyone with any experience, which in lots of ways is probably a bit of a risky venture, especially in the current times. But the reality is, I want to get people in that understand that they do have the ability to maybe scare themselves a little bit with how good their career can be. We empower people to succeed, Malcolm, by making sure that opportunities are there and publicly talked about on a regular basis, that people know what they can strive to do with us. We had 2 people that are now running our New Zealand office that were bartenders at our local pub, the Coach and Horses in Wellington Street in Covent Garden, and they had such an energy about them. They were New Zealanders that had been in the UK for a bit of time. They had such an energy about them that I said to the landlord, Sean, I said, Sean, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to speak to these 2. They've got something quite special about them. They came into our business. I'm probably still making up to Sean for that. They came into our business. They became our top performing consultants. They then said that it was their aim to be back in New Zealand, and we set them a target and worked with them to hit their target so they could establish an X4 business out in New Zealand, which they've done so for the last few years. And they started as bartenders at our local pubs. So empowering people to succeed, whether it be those girls that have started our New Zealand office, the guys that went out and started our New York office, or Paris, who's created their own brand within our business in communications. There are signs throughout the business that we aren't just talking about it. You can genuinely, if you can perform and excel and become everything that you can be, you can achieve some pretty scary things. So I think empowering to succeed is, resonates hopefully throughout those examples.
I love that. X2 times 2 now. And by the way, by the time Sean reopens the pub, he'll have forgotten all about it. The world seems to be moving to virtual interviewing. So what should candidates be doing to increase their chance of being selected? What new skills do you think they should develop?
I think one of the most interesting areas on this, Malcolm, is, as you said right at the beginning, I've been surprised at how many people have maybe not got a home setup that enables them to come across professionally. I'm impressed by your very smart appearance today, Malcolm, yourself. But like all these things, I think it's people, although they don't have to be in a suit and tie for a conversation, as I'm not today, they need to make sure that the lighting is okay. They need to make sure that their connection is going to support them to be able to give a good account of themselves. And I think most importantly that they should be testing their setup and testing how they come across on camera with their nearest and dearest, with their friends, just to make sure that they're going to show themselves in the best light. Because of course, the marketplace at the moment is highly competitive. I know the Open University's got some online courses. I know great business organisations like the REC and the APSCO as the recruitment governing bodies have done some great things in relation to the upskilling of furloughed workers, which is a really great idea as well. Any skills you can have to enhance yourself should always be encouraged. But ultimately, at the moment where so much is being done over video, I'd encourage everyone just to make sure their communication, that their setup is as good as it can be, because there's nothing worse than a very dark background, or you can't see someone's face properly, or they just haven't got, they're not looking as professionally as they could do. And I think that's probably the biggest advice I'd give to people at the moment.
Okay, great. Actually, now that was for candidates. Let's talk about companies. What should companies be doing about virtual interviewing? Are there any apps, for example? What new skills do companies need to learn to judge the right person for the job?
I think by now, in relation to the technology piece, the vast majority of companies have found out whether Microsoft Teams works for them, whether Zooms works for them, whether Google Hangouts works for them. And I think every business is going to be individual in relation to that. But I actually hosted a roundtable event for 15 of our UK clients about 6 or 7 weeks ago, Malcolm, in relation to what businesses should do to make their process as good as it can be. And actually, one of the most interesting things is they said the more people that businesses can get involved with the interview process is important, because you want multiple opinions. You want them to engage with as many people from an organisation as you can. And I think if they only meet just 1 or 2 people during the process and then get hired, they might be starting with an element of trepidation. And I think the reality is the more people that can speak to various areas of an organisation, from HR to their line manager to a director within the business, the more people they speak to, I think the more comfortable that people feel and become.
Excellent. Yeah. No, placing the wrong person in a job can be very costly. By the way, I think it said it'll cost you £90,000 if you place the wrong salesperson. It cost one of my friends $250,000. But how do you help your clients avoid such mistakes?
I think the biggest thing that you can do with that is quite simply to do as much as you can during an interview process. There is always, and we've made errors a lot of times ourselves in relation to hiring, because quite simply you're never going to know fully what someone's going to be like until they start in a position. But the reality is, as I mentioned before, the variety of people that you get to engage with people, the variety of tasks that you get people to do, and as much variety that you can get into your process to see the different sides of people's personality. It's very hard to test cultural fit in these type of times. But actually, if you get a variety of people to speak to the prospective candidate, you can do your very best endeavours. And actually, in lots of ways, you can actually make your process better than it may have been in a face-to-face office environment, because you're thinking that much more about how many other people's opinions you can get involved in a hiring process.
Yeah, great. I also add that don't try and clone yourself. Are UK companies investing in talent growth and retention to the right extent? How can they stop their best talent from being poached by competitors or others?
I think the biggest thing with talent is that they've got to be engaged with what you're doing. The reality is, recruitment's a phenomenally competitive marketplace. Everyone does the holidays and the uncapped commissions and all these type of things. But the reality is, it's what you're doing as a business that's going to resonate with people. What's your purpose? What are you actually doing it for? And you're not going to have to worry too much in relation to people getting poached by competitors if you're true to what you're good at, if you're true to what you believe in, and also people feel engaged with what you're doing. And I think those are the most important things that companies need to be aware of, and that to be communicated. They need to be aware of what's going on with the company, good or bad. People just want to be, it's a little bit like the government doing their daily briefings. It's the regularity of communication that people are going to want in times like this.
Excellent, yeah. Now, with this Meet the Leader show series, I've been interviewing many CEOs, MDs with global operations having to manage remotely. What's your personal approach to remote leadership or control? Do you have set virtual meetings? Do you virtually drop in unexpectedly, as some do? What's your approach and ethos?
I personally have become much better with my own self-organisation during this lockdown period that I'm going to be taking into normal working life whenever that may come. Having regularity and slots and recurring meetings in diaries is absolutely vital, because as a we're a small business. We've only got, as you say, circa 150 people. But the reality is even with a business of that size, there are many facets and many elements that you've got to manage. And without having diarised things in, it's incredibly easy to miss things. But it's also make sure that by diarising things that you are speaking to people, because it can be easy when you're in the office, maybe to go a couple of weeks without speaking in detail with one of your key team members because they're doing a good job, they're getting on with things. But the reality has been, and it's something that I'll be taking on for the rest of my working life now, of having a slot in the diary each week to make sure that you are catching up with those people is a very, very good and powerful thing. I don't drop in to other teams' meetings. I'll let them know if I'm keen to be a part of it, maybe 10 minutes before. Can you send me the link? It'd be great to be involved today. And I do like to do that on a regular basis because I think just a different voice and knowing that I'm there and knowing that I'm still there and caring is an important aspect. So I do try and do that as much as I can, as well as the regulated and organised diaries.
I think that's lovely, fresh leadership. So we're at ×3 at the moment. Look, employees are becoming increasingly alarmed that employers are presently showing a lack of care to them. Now, I know this is not everyone, but redundancy, Zoom by doom, seems to be the vogue. So how does X4 Group advise its clients in best practice of people care? After all, good talent is rare and needs to be nurtured, doesn't it?
I think the biggest thing with that, as we try and do as an organisation, is make sure that all employees have multiple channels to be able to communicate. They need to make sure that there's HR representatives that have reached out to them, ideally via video, not phone call, not text message, but face-to-face. How are you today is a great question to be asking all of your employees at the moment. Of course, they're going to be getting their line manager contact, but they need to be hearing from people high up in the business, which is why we do our company-wide meetings at 4:30 every Friday, cup of tea, glass of wine or a beer in hand to make sure that we all get the chance to come together, have a bit of a giggle and share some things that have happened in the last week. But there's got to be a multitude of different areas. It might be a performance coach as we have, it might be HR, it might be a director, it might be their head of branding, it will be their line manager. But even across those people, there's 5 different areas there that we use to support all of our staff. And I think that's the key. It shouldn't just be line managers. There should be a multiple options within the business to reach out to all of your employees.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, we haven't even finished the questions and you're already at ×4, X4. Right. So in the supposedly new normal, change will happen, and most likely in business culture. What do you think the new business culture of a successful company will look like?
That's interesting. I think the reality is, off the back of this last 3 months, it's certainly opened our eyes into what people can achieve whilst working remotely. And I think there's going to be some wonderful flexibility. Of course, flexibility has to come off the back of performance. That is an absolute given. But the reality is that I think companies will probably have less office space than they might have needed to have had before. They will trust people to be able to do things from home, like Twitter have so publicly done as well. And I think the reality is that the new culture, I don't think a lot of businesses will want to lose the face-to-face element, because like our business, it's a very young organisation. Virtually everyone is in their 20s, so it's a very social bunch. And those face-to-face elements will be important. But the reality is the flexibility to work that these new ways of working has allowed is going to be something that genuinely benefits and makes companies better and their culture better in the future.
Yeah. I'm, by the way, I love your effervescent and sort of positive leadership style there. Has it changed since you formed X4 Group?
I don't think you can ever truly change who you are as a person, but I absolutely believe that you can improve immeasurably over time. There aren't any days and weeks that goes by where you don't learn a little something. And I think that's why speaking to so many people, listening to podcasts, reading books, engaging with your employees, engaging with outside businesses, engaging on LinkedIn, there's so much learning to be done and so many little tips and things that you can do to self-improve. So since the X4 has been in existence, yeah, I've changed a lot in relation to how much I know now compared to what I did before, which is great.
Excellent. Okay. So what are you especially proud about?
I love the variety of backgrounds that we've got in our people. Diversity has been a big thing that's been talked about, Malcolm, in the last few weeks, especially with the terrible events that we've been seeing in the US and across the world. And I'm especially proud that although that we have a larger percentage of our people that have come from degree-related backgrounds, I love the fact we've had people that have come from a whole different walks of life that have come to be successful. The people that I mentioned who now run our New Zealand office, Hannah and Renee, that were literally working in a pub and they've gone through and do what they've done. I love that people have come into our business from all walks of life and been able to make great successes of themselves. So I think above all else, the personalities are so different, the backgrounds are so different, but people that want to achieve and maybe scare themselves a little bit, that's the thing I'm most proud about our organisation.
Okay. And finally, Peter, it's 3 wishes time. I haven't got my fairy godmother wand. You're all right. If you have those 3 wishes for the future of the profession of recruitment, what would they be?
The first, it's a really interesting question, 3 wishes, because where do you start in lots of ways? But I think the reality is recruitment needs to be recognised for what a great route it can be for people as a career. As I've mentioned, education in lots of ways doesn't stop you being a great recruiter. So that's a really great leveler in relation to where it fits in the UK job market. So I think the recognition is the first fairy godmother wish that I'd like to wish for, the recognition of what a great career it can be for young people. Secondly, I think it in terms of a wish, it deserves more respect than it gets. I think in lots of ways, it's unfortunately tarnished by some bad eggs that exist within the recruitment sector, and a little bit like ambulance chasing law firms, that doesn't tarnish the whole of the legal industry. And I think recruitment maybe at times gets a bit of an unfair reputation when there's some outstanding things that are being done within it. So that'd be my second wish. And I think the third thing that I really wish for is a little bit like we try and do as a business. It continues to be the sector that is recognised to be the best for diversity, that it continues to be the best industry that leads from the front in relation to all things diversity, the backgrounds that you come into it from, be it race, gender, sex, whatever it may be, that it continues to be the leading light in the United Kingdom in relation to that area.
Wonderful. I just knew when I was doing my research before talking to you that this was going to be a stimulating interview, and it's certainly been so. Peter Rabey of X4 Group, thank you very much indeed for today's interview.
Thanks so much, Malcolm.